Fuck. All right, we're rolling.
Planet B
Presents
Cult and Culture Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 49 of the Cult and Culture Podcast, part 2, with our homies from InDecline. We've already gave you the spiel. If you don't know what the fuck we're talking about and you missed part 1, go back and check out part 1. It's very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Check this out. In that documentary, there's I don't know which artist it was, but it was like amongst a bunch of stuff. Like there was like a Rage Against the Machine clip and maybe a Public Enemy clip, and they're talking about like, well, we don't. I don't remember. It wasn't anybody from either of those bands. It was like a person talking, saying like, well, we don't create music for money. Because if that's why you're doing it, it's not from your heart. It's like we do it from our heart, not for money. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Because and then I started like wondering about like certain artists and why they do things, especially like Public Enemy and Rage Against the Machine. And I wonder like, I can't even imagine. I don't make money playing music, so I can't even imagine like how it must feel like. Do I want to be more outspoken or get millions of dollars? And then you just try to figure out, because some of the stuff that like, and I'm going to be a judgmental asshole, but some of the stuff that some of those artists done, I'm just like, that's shit's whack. Like, that's fucking goofy or whatever. You know?
There was a time where, especially
blame it on the audience
or blame it on the label. I mean, certain things become commercially viable especially when, you look at Rage and Trump and look at Not My President, Fat Mike during the Bush war on terrorism, like all that stuff, and I mean, we were the recipients of a lot of like cold calls from, we sat in like a Netflix office at one point, just trying to figure out before we realized again that we should just do Art of Protest ourselves, that documentary. We talked to like some pretty major players in Los Angeles because it was like the hot thing. Trump was up for re-election. George Floyd, like everyone was like all about this shit. And a lot of people were coming to us like, oh, what are you guys doing? You seem to be like the tip of the spear, or the spear rather. And it was like, okay, but you can just tell this is just like such a blatant fucking money grab here, because in a couple months, if this dude loses, you're all going to not care, So yeah, if you're on the radio, and your label's like, I feel like if you've like found that sweet spot where you're like commercially viable, there's plenty of bands, and I don't want to throw anyone on the bus, but there's like plenty of bands that can like poetically say the things that get people pumped. But I always laugh because I feel like the Joe Rogan fans are listening to that same song, like fucking working out super hard and, using it at their Trump rallies, because it's not pointed enough. It's like the vague pump up track for like empowerment, and it like might have been written to say one thing, but you could just as easily be co-opted by fucking Matt Gaetz,
Yeah. I mean, I just remember seeing like Che Guevara on a shirt worn by like some fucking jock dickhead calling me faggot, and I'm like, dude, this is like the weirdest situation that we're all in right now,
Sorry about that. I've changed some things.
Yeah. and I don't want to blame Zach or anybody in Rage, but it's just like, man, like what do you do? Because I don't know, like I don't know, I could not imagine like being in that predicament where you're just like, and maybe that's why they stopped at one point or whatever,
It's the curse of cool. And you see that happen with cities, you see that happen with restaurants. There's all these things that like when they pop, and it just becomes, everyone wants a piece of it, and it changes everything.
Yeah. Sort of like the gentrification in Barrio Logan, similar thing. Like, I guess maybe
it's marketing. It's by design though. It seems like it's not, but there's people behind most of that stuff to make it go a certain course. And they run it all the way into the ground as fast as they can and get as much money out of it. It's the same as restaurants, for instance. Like, I was into that for a little bit. I was dabbling in possibly getting involved in that stuff. I met billionaire people. Their whole idea of a restaurant is like, you make one, you're selling the second one before the first one's even finished. And then you're out. And that's it. It's like, passion projects are not really a reality to most things, like music and all that stuff. Like, there's people that do it, but they're small little groups. They're little, like, tiny little islands in the world. Like, people that do things with passion are never really rich or revered. They do their own thing. All the other stuff is just marketed. People jump on board. I love this. And then they're so shallow and they're so quick. See it on their phone. 30 seconds later, they already forgot what they saw.
Yeah.
It's like, be into it and then out and move to the next thing. Boom. Next thing. And that's just...
I'm hesitant to like bash a lot of that stuff though, because I remember being a kid and Rage Against the Machine was on. I remember that being one of the first times that I had heard a band say what they said, like long before I ever got cool and started diving into other bands and, you know, shit like that. It was like Rage was being shoved down our throats. I was an MTV generation.
Entry level, like, activist band.
100%, like the Howard Zinn of bands at the time. And that was like, okay. And then you go on from there. And then eventually, like years later in life, you realize, like, yeah, Rage was entry level, and there's all this other stuff you didn't know about because they weren't given the platform, they weren't whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it serves its purpose, but like ultimately, like anything else, it's the responsibility of the person. If you have a conscience, and we tell people this all the time, like if something makes you feel a certain way, like suppressing that is not healthy, you know? So whether you're doing something on your own or with a group of your friends or whatever, like that, it should just be like at the base level. If you're pissed about something, go fucking say something or do something, you know? And if more of us did that, it's pretty simple, you know? I think we would have a lot more equality, but there's just, there's far too many people that frankly, you know, work their ass off so hard that at the end of the day when they come home there's no room or you don't have the physical capacity to pick up a book or watch a documentary. You just got to sleep and go back to your job. And I mean that's, again, like he said, just by design. You keep people just like fucking bleeding out every day, and you gotta, you know, very manageable amount of people to
phones are it now.
That's another thing too that's interesting, because I get kind of frustrated when like rad shit happens. Like a good example is when you guys did the Klansman hanging. I was like, this is so righteous, and it was gone instantly. And I'm like, oh man, like why don't we resonate on that for a second and appreciate it? Or like, I mean, even like with the serviceman that lit himself on fire. That's long forgotten. I can't remember his fucking name. It used anyhow.
Which is sad. Which is pretty gnarly, but that
should have like resonated.
Insane. Yes, but it's suppressed for a reason. You can't have like that. That is so gnarly. Someone that sets themselves on fire to prove a point is
a service person too.
Gnarly thing to do. Like, I mean,
you saw it with like as soon as, you know, Israel started fucking everything up over there. Like you watched people take to social media, post pictures, because everyone's a journalist now. Yeah, you know, and I mean, they suppressed that overnight. Like there was like a little window of time where you could maybe a picture of a dead baby would slip through on your feed. That shit doesn't happen anymore. That's gone.
Now it's like this shit's like blurred out for what, and I'm like, it's like not. It's like a picture of like a dog or whatever, you know, with a Palestinian flag on it. Or something.
We come from like we're on that like Emmett Till shit, and we always have been, where it's like, you know, with George Floyd, with everything else, like we think it's extremely important that, you know, people interface with these things so you can have the necessary reaction and then hopefully subsequent follow through if you decide that is too much to endure, as opposed to not looking at it. What Emmett Till's mother did and having that open casket and seeing, letting the world see
completely
what those men did to her son. You know, like to me, that's no different than all of us sitting through the 8+ minutes of George Floyd being executed in a broad daylight. You know, I mean, that was a hard fucking video to watch, but that fueled a lot of fires. And if you just swipe past it because of the trigger warning shit, like you're doing so many people a disservice. You know, and
the trigger warning, I feel like makes me like click on it. You know,
every time.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's like. I wonder I really do want to know like what the effect of that is, if it actually works, because everyone wants to see that thing that they're.
Well, I wonder though, because I think we're a part of a generation. I mean, we talk about like Faces of Death and all that stuff, where like we gravitated towards that kind of shit. And I mean, I'm in my 40s. When I talk to kids that are in their 20s or younger, I think it is genuinely the opposite. Like,
really?
I think they don't want to see that stuff.
I mean, I don't want to see it like this is rad, dead babies, but I want to be like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
I think that has
crazy.
to do with our conditioning, is we were just we sort of didn't shy away from it. But yeah, I remember during the war on terror, all the restrictions on photographers and coffins and all these kinds of things, and thinking that as a kid, just being like, well, that is so counterproductive, because if we saw these things, they should open those coffins up, anyway. But I get the impression that some of that content's just like too much for people, and that's fine.
I also read the thing. I can't remember who. I could be wrong. I feel like it was like Sam McPheeters or someone from Born Against was saying how like in the 90s there was all this use of like, especially during the first Gulf War, where it was like dead bodies of like Iraqis and stuff, and or it was because it usually wasn't like U.S. soldiers that were dying. So it was like this thing where it was like charred bodies, and then after a while you're just like, man, what is that doing? Like, is it making you be like, oh my god, war's bad, or do you already think, yeah, fucking war's terrible and a charred body's terrible, and like, is it really doing a thing? And I wonder if it did it a disservice that that was like the thing. Everything was like blah, like crazy, and now we're just like
numb.
Well, Vietnam was the first war that was televised, right? So it's the first time it brings it into people's living rooms. And they just were kind of clueless. They didn't know the reaction, but they were testing the American public to see how they would react. It didn't work out so well for them, It did get half the people fighting, rioting against it. That whole desert stuff was all like based on like, yeah, they attacked us and they flew these planes into this building, we got to go annihilate these people.
Before 9/11 though.
Okay, then that stuff was over. Kuwait, no one even knew where that place existed, right?
Well, there was like Gaddafi, which was like
gas and oil.
US
like what? I don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
But then it's just like American machoism of arrogance of like, yeah, we kill these fuckers and that's what they get. And they sell and market that whole idea that we're superior to everybody else on this planet. And for some reason, we got to stomp people into the ground and show you who's boss. So then they do it again. And now it's like people don't really even have a clue that like robots are killing all these people.
Yeah.
Like that they're using AI to like just find people and send drones to annihilate
There's
them
people
off
like
the
in
planet.
Nevada like destroying other countries. Yeah.
The whole thing that takes place in Gaza is all robots.
Yeah.
It's robots that are killing people. It's not. It's a robot AI that's picked these people, followed them home, kills them with all their family members. And you have this whole idea like, yeah, that's what they deserve. It's like the mind is being twisted by all this media to think like, oh yeah, it's some sort of war. Robots are killing people. Like you got to think like, at some point they might come after you. You have no defense against this stuff. Like we are branching into a whole nother spectrum on the places we're going now. Like this is insane. Like the world is like definitely on just a precipice of like completely going crazy. But it was always crazy even back all these generations. But now we are like in like the next revolution mechanically and machinely. This computer stuff, like Pandora's box is being opened up and you have all these crazy billionaire dudes basically in the ear of this, like the clown, the naked clown with the little wiener is like is in charge now. And yeah, it's like definitely we're in for who knows what, man. It is going to be crazy. And then this idea of like deporting all these people out of this country is just like, I don't think people have a half a brain to think of like how many of these people make your life nice.
Yeah.
And you want to kick them all out. You have no clue what you're in for.
Also, just to say, like, there goes empathy and any sort of trace of humanity. Like,
but that was, I think that was already out the door
a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, because the more people focus on their phones and just watch TikTok and watch people dance and find their dopamine fix, and like they don't realize it's easier to just like not pay attention to what's really going on.
Yeah,
and like they are buying it. It used to be the television, and now it's like it's in their hand. It's everywhere they go, and they have the notifications and like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
and there's hopefully there's enough little pockets of people that listen to this stuff or whatever that kind of see it and figure it out and can make big strides in the future to change things. Hopefully they get the point.
Well, and one thing you touched on earlier that we didn't really like get into that we should, especially at this point, is that not only is this work are these issues important, but it's fun to go out and do these things. It's super fucking fun. So humor is important, but like just the adventures that we've gone on with our friends to like produce this work.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the kinds of things that, I mean, just one of these would be enough to tell grandkids about for, we've had hundreds of them, And so that's just like such an important point to all of this, is that there's a lot of doom and gloom. Like, we don't want to put any more sad bastard work out into the world. It took us a while to like find that nice balance between educational, inspirational, humor, all those things. That's tough to do.
I mean, if you always look at Andy Kaufman, you're going to be good, right?
Yeah, but you got to have like, there's other things too to consider. 'Cause it's like, yeah, you can look at Andy Kaufman, but then you have to take into consideration like, who we're so divided. So like, who is this built for? Because you don't want to just create work for the echo chamber. And years ago, we moved to the deep South, and we worked there for a number of years, like in Mississippi, in Arkansas, in Alabama, specifically because we were looking around after 2020, going like, fuck, like we don't need our backs padded for this work in Los Angeles. We don't need people from Seattle to tell us that this is dope. They're fucking fine in Seattle. But that's like a whole nother ecosystem there, and really like the basis and the like the nucleus of so much of these issues that we bitch about all the time. People that are most affected by it are there, and it's hard in the face of all of that to like joke and have a good time, but it's so essential because it sends that message. When you look at Abby Hoffman and you look at Andy Kaufman and all those people, like they were having a blast. They're taking the piss out of them. Like, that's so necessary.
Also, like the giant banner that said, what the
God bless abortion.
Yes, like fortunately, I guess we can't do that in California because there isn't a stupid huge crucifix, so like you're gonna have to do it in the South.
Well, and I mean that again, the state of Arkansas, like they're fucked. Like it's just like you don't think about it when you're if you live in California, like it's just a news story. But if you like, if you're in a relationship in Arkansas, your life is changing dramatically. Especially if you don't have the means to travel into a friendly state.
Right. Yeah, but that travel to friendly state thing is,
vigilante shit now.
Starting to close down. Not going to be able to do that.
Again, and we work with like Shout Your Abortion and all these like rad groups that the name of the game, stay ahead. They're trying to stockpile the pills, like figure out distribution, like figure out the rides, safe houses, like all of these conversations have been, this has been years now, but, you gotta stay ahead. You can't take it so seriously that you just like wake up every day fucking angry and miserable. No one wants to be around people like that. We all grew up with those like punk rock friends that were just dicks.
It's really hard to not be like that though. It's so fucking hard.
But you have to, so much of that is just like balancing out what else are you doing throughout your day? Whether it's like exercise or like time with friends that don't fucking do this kind of shit. Like you have to, there's so many things that I've learned over the years that have like helped me to, even if you need to get on and watch some mindless TV, whatever it is, balance it out, because nothing makes me like more, I don't know, like nothing turns me off more than the idea of like sitting in a room full of like straight edge vegan activists. Like, that's a fucking nightmare. Like I'd rather be in a room full of Trump supporters, frankly, because I feel like I could have a more productive meeting if I was just like friendly and calm and was just like, hey, let's address the elephant in the room. And living in the South, we've had those conversations. We've sat on those porches. We've done that. And you look at like the Black Panthers and a lot of other groups that reached out across the aisle for that specific reason, because if you perpetuate that us versus them shit, like you want those people that are teetering. You don't need the fucking straight edge vegan kid. He's cool. He's good. He's got his Noam Chomsky tattoo. You know, like
That's a thing.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
But
It is
yeah,
now.
yeah. But yeah, you want to like, yeah, you want to catch those kids that are like misinterpreting rage lyrics. You know,
Yeah.
and just be like, hey man, let's have a conversation.
Also, like the whole side where like I don't want to point the finger at like people on the right, but like, you know, Trump supporters and stuff where they're kind of taught to hate downwards.
Yeah.
So like oppress something that's below you, you know, immigrants or whoever, women, whatever these fucking people, these people on that side of the spectrum are, they're looking for someone to demonize. And I think that is like a big problem that we're facing on the left, because the left is like, well, I'm gonna fucking hate you because you weren't inclusive of my gender or whatever, and
shit rolls downhill too, you know, and that's kind of like, you see that within the workplace and a lot of other elements where it's just like, yeah, management acts a certain way, and then you've got this and this, and then by the time you get down to the guy that's cleaning the bathrooms, it's like he's just being fucking kicked around. Yeah, people like to do that, and it's unfortunate because working class people, 70 million of them in this country, have put their faith in a fucking multimillionaire that doesn't give a shit about that.
I mean, we're seeing it right now. And people like, even the what union was it? It was like in like, I don't know, I'm gonna probably say the wrong place, but like some union that was backing Trump is just like, oh, we're already fucked. It's like the steel union in Philly or in Pennsylvania or something like that, and they're just like, oh yeah, this is fucked up. We shouldn't have supported Trump, and it's like, that's going to happen like daily as soon as that fucking guy takes office.
Yeah, there's going to be that, but what's been fascinating is like the kiss the ring shit that's happened.
Oh,
in the wake
yeah.
of this. Like all of the people that have now come to terms with like, okay, it is what it is. Like the Zuckerbergs and the, you know, who's the other guy he had beef with, all those fucking
Peter Thiel.
Yeah, there's like these guys that have like, I mean, obviously his own vice president, but like all the people that have openly talked shit out of him. And yeah, Musk has gone head to head with him, and everyone's just kissing the ring. And so, yeah, he's proved beyond, you know, any doubt that this is what the people clearly want. And it's fascinating to look back in American politics to where, like, I think it was like McGovern or whoever, or like even Nixon when he was sweating on the debate, and like how much of a monumental fuck up people made that out to be, because of what people took away from that as far as his character and his poise and all that shit. And like, you know, that was McGovern, whoever Hunter S. Thompson was supporting, the guy like smoked weed and it cost him his presidency. Trump, like when the Ground by the Pussy tape came out, like everyone was like, well, that's lights out.
I know. I thought it was too.
Surely, like if you look at history,
I mean, even his recent debate where he's like, "They were eating the dogs." It's like, dude, come on, man!
And
like this.
How
is so
many
stupid.
of those times have? I mean,
there's a gazillion of them.
Shoot him in the face on Fifth Avenue. I mean, there's so many things.
Mocking the one reporter, like everything. Everything comes out of the guy's mouth is fucking crazy
and
shit.
And it has done the opposite.
Yeah, I know.
It's a lot of a distraction, though. He says crazy shit, but in the background he's doing gnarly stuff.
Yeah.
He's got his boys doing all sorts of stuff that people aren't paying attention to because they're too obsessed with the dog thing, barking for a whole week about a dog while they go and discontinue this or that. Or
meanwhile, there's ramifications to the comments about the dogs because they ran people out of that town. And,
it's nuts.
You know, and
it's not cool.
Between the media and science, I mean, he's completely just like gutted everyone's trust in like these huge organizations, you know, and
education,
all these things. Yeah, I mean, there's so many horrible things you can say about the media, and I mean, there's all kinds of shitty things you can say about like obviously our healthcare system and science as well. But to make it so that you can't really have those conversations anymore, I remember when like fake news became like a thing, and it. For the first time in my life, I felt like it was like capitulation in those conversations was happening so much sooner than it used to when you would have a debate with someone because they could just be like, well, that's fake news. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of it now. Like, it's just like, that's just the way you cancel the conversation is you don't believe it, you know?
But then there's things like where you kill a CEO and like, there's like a lot of support or like like there's an aspect of like heroism placed on someone doing that, and like you can't hide that because it's in the comments, you know, like that's not like fake news at this point where you're there's like this insane amount of support over like what that guy did, you know. And I think that might be I don't even know what that even I don't even know what I'm going.
Well, that's someone taking shit to a level that exactly like we don't do that in this country. Like, think about it. You know, like CEOs are not gunned down in America very often.
No, black kids that are innocent.
Yeah, kids with Skittles get shot, but you don't do, or you got the guy, the performer on the subway in fucking New York getting choked to death. That's common. School shootings are common. But
no, that stuff is acceptable. It's when a CEO is killed, then it's a threat, and that's a threat to the people in charge. So therefore, we have to get rid of that. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and they'll probably try to give them the death penalty.
The terrorism thing is an insanity.
It's a deterrent, though.
Right. It's to scare, like, we're going to charge him with terrorism.
But it's very clear.
Federal and state.
Bipartisan support in the streets for that dude.
Yeah.
You know, like, without a doubt. I mean, I got a laugh out of it. There was an article that said that, X amount of hours after that had gone public, I think it was like the United Healthcare Facebook had 36,000 clapping hand emojis on the. I mean, just the internet just came alive with that shit, and I mean, it's probably going to be just like the service member that lit himself on fire. I mean, this will pass.
I mean, this one's lingered a little bit longer, which I think, and it's because of the system and stuff.
Yeah, it has
because it's ongoing.
Yeah,
but that's. That just doesn't happen, That's just something that like we're not the kind of country where we're like doing broad daylight executions of CEOs. I mean, that's some purge shit. And the one takeaway from it that was sort of uplifting was the fact that it joined everybody together, like the healthcare system. Like regardless of your political leanings, it was like, we have to address this. And that's. It's unfortunate someone has to be shot in the back. Like, it's pretty ridiculous to have to go to that level to get millions of people to, like, pay attention to a broken system. But, I mean, what else are you supposed to do? If you look at your options, especially in America, like, I mean, we've got it pretty easy in some respects. We're not Saudi Arabia, but, like, in others, you're kind of fucked. People can't afford to go to jail. People can't, like, there's certain risks you just can't afford to take. But someone like Luigi comes along, and
I wonder what the next 4 years will give us if there's someone like Luigi or maybe a much lesser degree, like InDecline. Like you get caught up in the system and you're done. Like I wonder what the ramifications will be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of people will see so much stuff now that they're not shocked. It's like Luigi's like not a dumb kid. He's a kid that probably like tried to like tell, but no one listens. So it's the next level is like, oh shit, there's been how many politicians that have said this, or how many people have stepped up and said, hey man, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. No one listens. People, you have artists painting stuff, you have people making documentaries, you have people talk about it all the time. No one listens.
I mean,
and then, it's unfortunate that, like, the only way this kid saw a way to get any attention for it was to go to this level of shooting someone. And the reaction has basically, like, opened up a conversation, which is, like, at the expense of someone's life, which is pretty gnarly because... Of course, the CEO is in charge of all these people on the other end of the spectrum that were like denied health stuff and died. You got all these people that have just died trying to get taken care of. They paid for their insurance, they put their money in, and then like, oh, sorry, we can't help you. So it's like, if it works, it could be looked as a street art. In a sense, performance art. It's a really bad.
I mean, but I do think there's a lot of people that maybe looked at it like that, like because people, it's like that whole thing where like in that fucking Reservoir Dogs thing where they like kill the cop and like we didn't kill a real person though, and it's like I think a lot of people are looking at it like that, like that's not a real person. Like the CEO it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you have. I mean, it's baked into the like that you have an organization. It's the same thing that's happening in Palestine right now. You have a well-armed, like internationally supported army just eviscerating people who, I mean, it's same thing with United Healthcare versus all these American citizens.
Of course.
It's fine
yeah.
when this group does it. It's terrorism when this group
Got
does it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
remember,
speaking of that, I mean, they just attacked their third country, by the way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
today, so
Yeah.
like that's even more so of an insanity.
Yeah.
So
well, and it
And then you wonder why Trump won the election.
yeah, totally. After Sandy Hook, or not Sandy Hook. No, it was Sandy Hook. Parkland, after the shooting of Parkland, we did a billboard in Las Vegas that it was a big, like huge AR or something, and it just said like shoot an AR, $39, and we changed it to shoot a school kid.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, we put Save Lives, Reform Laws, and that was like a first-class ticket in front of the FBI. They didn't give a fuck about the subtext. They just saw a billboard that said shoot school kids, and that was it. It was lights out. I mean, arrested at the airport boarding a flight level shit.
Who was arrested?
Members of our group.
Huh.
Yeah. And so in doing like all of the interviews, because that went pretty viral.
Yeah.
Like it was such an obvious statement to make was, once again, children were murdered in a school, right? Like our country is pretty like adamant that we're not going to do anything about that.
Yes.
And we think that after Sandy Hook, clearly, like it's this, I remember before that, I remember my own father saying, well, the day it happens to little kids, and how many times does that happen, And so, we went and did this billboard, and then when we were speaking with all the press about it, we were just like, how is there all this outrage over, and like, whether it's feigned or not, over this like vinyl sticker on a billboard.
People thought it was insensitive, or they
like,
couldn't
outraged.
understand the like.
They thought it was insensitive. They thought it was just too much. And I'm just thinking like another, pile of bodies in an elementary school is not too much, and then also talking about like, sometimes you have to be, like with Luigi, sometimes you have to be louder than that actual AR-15 through your art or whatever. You have to think like, well, what's going to get people's attention, and that particular billboard, it wasn't very fucking funny. I mean, it was like, there was a little bit of like tongue in cheek in there, obviously, but
the humor is like being able to change the text so it still looks like.
I
get
totally.
that part.
Yeah. Well, we were like, there was obviously people that were applauding it, but the point I'm trying to make is that we were met with all this outrage and just really stunned by the fact that no one really seemed to want to do much about the issue that we were addressing in the first place. And we've experienced that so many times.
But who's holding the puppet hand? It's the NRA and like all the lobbyists. Like, fucking shut those people down.
100%. Yeah. And it just, again, like so much of this, and it's baked into just even our logo. Like you follow these issues long enough, you always end up in a bank account somewhere. There's always like something financially incentivizing people to make these decisions. And when you put our work out there, the bottom line can't be fucked with, like, I don't think Donald Trump really gives a fuck about a lot of this stuff,
I don't even think he's like a racist. I think he's just playing into this shit to get this fucking people.
He sees what works.
Completely.
Yeah. Look at Alex Jones. Some of these guys, like, I always have this like sneaking suspicion that and same thing with Russell Brand. Like, remember like years ago, no one really, he wasn't doing or saying any of that shit. But then you look at like Joe Rogan's demographic and Theo Vaughn, and there's like this pipeline, like InfoWars and Trump and all this stuff and UFC and all that stuff, to me is like very baked into the same little environment.
God, UFC too?
Fuck yeah, UFC. Dana White's like,
I don't really pay attention.
Trump as fuck, yeah, but like all of that bro shit, and they talked about it with this election, the bro vote, whatever.
I know.
And I look at guys like Alex Jones, and I think, is this the like fanatical right wing Andy Kaufman? Like, is this dude on some just straight up performance art shit? Like, same thing with Russell Brand. Like, is he just putting this on because his like outraged politics are generating an obscene amount of fucking views for him? And then think about it. Like, we live in the kind of country that we could all wake up tomorrow then Russell Brand could put up a post and be like, I was just fucking with you guys. And nothing would happen.
Yeah.
Like nothing, there would be no ramifications. And
He'd be like, I didn't really rape those people.
yeah. And furthermore, no one would even care. It was just,
Yeah.
but it's like, but meanwhile, you just spent all these years fueling the fire.
But
for
you don't, but
financial-
even like Trump, it doesn't have to be like, okay, I didn't rape the people. He just ignores it. And
Yeah,
it's like, hey, I think there's like, you actually did, because there's like court hearings and you've been like convicted.
Yeah. But look at, it's always, they love a martyr.
Deny.
Yeah, look at Morgan Wallen. Look at all these guys that have like had their little fuck up, and then sell out stadiums and sell out records, in the face of it, because they love to rush to them and be like, hey, just said the N-word, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then, but they'll support Kyle Rittenhouse. The money that he's made off that killing
That kid's such a twerp.
is fucking insane. I mean, and same thing with the dude that choked homeboy out on the fucking train. Like, legal fees paid, speaking engagements, invited to Mar-a-Lago to dine with these people.
Football game too, I think.
Football game. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was at the game.
Yeah.
Like, he's a hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, killed a man on a fucking subway.
So
Yeah.
that's interesting, because then there's like, not to say that this is the equal thing, but like with like Luigi killing
The
CEO, he's got like insane money being donated to his legal defense fund, which is
I think they seized that, though.
I
think I read that they were like,
did they
fuck
seize
you.
Kyle Rittenhouse's shit? I don't know, but like I just
Well, Kyle
the thing-
Rittenhouse wasn't convicted as quickly as Luigi was. Like, I mean, he's already fucked.
yeah.
Rittenhouse was able to like have his day in court.
I feel
Luigi's
like
not.
I feel like maybe Rittenhouse wasn't like signing up to go like to prison for the rest of his life. Or I feel like maybe Luigi was like, all right, like I'm gonna probably do this and like this is it.
This is it.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're talking about two different things.
Right.
Not really. It's one guy shooting another guy. So technically it's still murder.
Well,
It's
one
still
of them
killing
was,
people.
yeah, I guess so.
It's only different from perspective of
Sure,
what side
sure.
you sit on.
I mean, it is
You
kind
know,
of
it's
funny
like
Luigi
because
can say self-defense too.
there's a side of both of them, like, oh, there's people that are really happy to see that guy choke that guy out on the subway.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of guys that are stoked to see him drive across state lines to another town and shoot a couple of people.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same as some people are stoked to see what Luigi did. Reality is one guy shot another guy.
I think
But
that
they're
we
treated completely differently according to who's in charge and who actually says, this guy's a hero and that guy sucks.
yeah.
And that's the big difference.
Yeah.
It's like you have people in our government who say, these two guys that kill people, they're cool. I like them.
Mm-hmm.
They get to go to football games with me. They get to party. This guy killed a white CEO worker guy that's a millionaire.
Yeah.
I don't like him.
Yeah.
We need to fully make an example of him. We're going to smash this guy. But the crime is the same, but it's obviously, it doesn't play out that way.
No, look
Yeah.
at January 6th. I mean, you could just as easily replace that mob with a bunch of, Antifa protesters. And I mean, they wouldn't have gotten within 100 yards of that building without getting
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if they were all wearing black and stuff, yeah. Never would have happened.
Yeah, but again, propped up. There's a lot of those guys that are, and again, it's in their own little like ecosystem. But Trump's going to pardon them for sure, without a doubt. And there would have been so much bloodshed if that was on some, Black Lives Matter or like any other protest. So, yeah, it's pretty funny. Like the groups that support Rittenhouse that are so against like a liquor store's window being broken to the point where you have to have these vigilantes come in with assault rifles to like kill protesters. Have no problem with what happened on January 6th. And I don't give a fuck about that Capitol. But I mean, I kind of give a fuck about just the entire, like, the whole fabric being just totally torched. The things that kind of keep us together. When you've reached, like, rock bottom, like, there's no rules anymore. And the pendulum can swing pretty far, and people have made that argument. Ta-Nehisi Coates made it regarding Obama's election and Trump being elected after that. There's all kinds of things you can look at, and I've made the same point to friends about Luigi's thing, like, who want to sit here and be like, oh, man, CEOs are going to start getting fucking murked, and it's the whole thing. I'm like, no, they're not. And watch, like...
That's the one that'll happen, and it won't happen again.
No, and watch what happens. Look what happened after 9/11, and look what happened. I mean, like, when the pendulum swings back our way, we get fucked every time, so much harder. So, yeah, like maybe there was a little celebration that you can have for the Luigi thing, but like it's not really gonna, you know, by the time they're done with him, and Cop City to me is like the perfect example in Georgia. Like they've made, you know, just like the act of sitting in a forest, federal terrorism charges, and they play that card every time they want to pump that deterrent.
The same with green terrorism or how the environmental
Animal rights
terrorism.
activists.
Yeah, same kind of thing. But I wonder, like, because it really comes. The ultimate question is like, humans we lack the intellect to negotiate peace, like across the board, whatever side of any spectrum you're on. Humans are not capable of it, and we result to fucking stupid tactics.
I mean, there's certain, like, when I look at that globally, I mean, there seems to have been countries that have managed to stay out of shit. And we're arguably in the worst country for foreign intervention or civil, you know, upheaval.
The pig of
that.
the world.
I mean, we're fucked. Like, we can't negotiate peace.
Yeah.
Like, we what was that, Megadeth? Peace sells. But
Who's buying it?
yeah, like, but yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of shit. But I've traveled the world pretty extensively, and I've definitely been places where I'm like, you know, you've kind of fared well on the global scale of, you know, you're not imprisoning all your fucking citizens. You got health care. You're not involved in 17 fucking wars at the same time. You know, everyone's got their shit. But I think we as a country are just like,
Peacock syndrome.
Yeah.
Every guy just, you know, it's like, I'm better than you, regardless. Like, nobody can just, like, look at each other as equals, you know. Someone's always got to be the oppressor. And will always be that way.
And historically speaking, if you look at, like, Latin American countries and certain European countries, I mean, there's such a rich history of uprisings and movements, and things are done differently over there. But I think people with like Che and, you know, some of these like heroes that people have, they make the mistake of applying it to like how things work here. And they always want to talk about, you know, like armed rebellion and all these things. And I'm sorry, but that's just not, what are you going to go out with your Antifa friends and battle a drone? You know, like that's just not how shit's going to play out here.
I mean, it is cosplay.
100%. Yeah.
When I would watch like in Portland, like Antifa and Proud Boy people fighting, it just looks so dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks as dumb as like watching Kyle Rittenhouse cry, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like people need to fucking just, you know, chill out, but also negotiate some kind of actual structurally, you know, changing.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything to help. Because, you know, I always look at things through the sort of like the lens of like the working class. And, you know, my father was in a union, and I remember growing up and him going to picket lines and doing all that stuff, and then I remember talking to him the day that some banks were burned down, you know, after George Floyd. And I mean, you just think like, sorry, but you know, those dudes aren't going to jump on board with that kind of shit. You know, like if you need teachers and firemen and like, you know, you need everybody on your side with these causes, and the United Healthcare debacle is a perfect example of a very clear case where everyone could get on board with something. And
because everyone's getting fucked across the spectrum.
Everybody. Right.
Yeah.
And
well, everyone except the billionaires or millionaires at least.
But look how we chose to address it. You know,
we didn't.
Yeah. I mean, it was complacency, and then eventually a bullet in some dude's back who will forget his name in a week.
Well, I mean, even the people he worked for forgot about him because the meeting went on without him. Like, they didn't cancel the meeting or nothing. They still held the meeting even though he didn't show up.
Yeah.
I
did like how...
Which is a pretty gnarly statement. Like, come on. Their cell phones are going off like, hey, Ryan's dead in the street. Anyways, the meeting didn't get delayed or anything. It took place.
That's crazy shit.
Okay, so, like, I mean, I would hope if I had to meet any of my friends and somehow I got hit by a car on the way, that they would just go, hey, let's take a moment and just
band
practice.
practice.
You know, like,
they're like, oh, we're gonna get a new bass player.
Yeah, get the footage.
You know, like, I mean, it's just that says a lot. You know, that like how it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
like people aren't really valuing life in this country enough to realize like, dude, you're expendable, and you could be gone tomorrow, too, and no one's going to shed a tear.
Well, these issues are really big and broad, and part of what we're going to be doing next year is looking at, like, taking it way down to like a microscopic level, to your community, to the people that are within like your area code. And that show in Vegas is like, as I mentioned, it's sort of part art show, but it's also like, the bigger part of it is like getting all these people together from all these different activist collectives so that you can, on Valentine's Day, we're going to do like a speed dating event where you're like sitting at tables with different activist groups for X amount of minutes. And like, there's a host and there's like a whole like speed dating room that you sit across from, like a sex worker group and a women's reproductive rights group and all these other, and you speed date with them.
Holy
and you
shit.
get their literature and you figure out how to donate or volunteer is really
Wow.
the big push. But that's, that's sort of what it's going to take, I think, in the next, however many years is instead of trying to like attack these big, broad issues, and there are some big ones, I think it's going to be very necessary to take inventory of the people that are within your community and within your little, your own little like culture, and start forming those bonds with people that you can see on a regular basis, and maybe not go for broke, but just like, a strength in numbers kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Just get everyone together and just do a bunch of little shit. Stay low key. Don't go too crazy.
Leave your phone at home.
Leave your phone at home. Yeah.
People need to leave their phones at home and just start talking,
And that's,
passing notes, and being the biggest way to change things.
yeah. And that'll be a good way to, I think, kind of like weather the storm that's coming, because we know it's coming.
Uh-huh.
There's no like debating how fucked things are going to be. So, why fall into that trap and get a bunch of people locked up or burned out within the first couple months of this shit? You might as well just like, you gotta use that time that you have now. I mean, we have like a month or less or whatever it is, to start formulating ways to spend the foreseeable future, even beyond Trump, thinking of like adventurous and, positive ways to like get together with people that are like-minded and and affect change. Whether that's liberating a billboard that thousands of commuters are going to see on their way to work just to give them that little like aha moment, or starting a fucking organization that gets banned books into communities that need them. Whatever the case, there's a million things, but that's like been the way InDecline's always positioned ourselves, is we don't really stick to one script. We might talk about racism one day, and we might get into like a Donald Trump thing or a fucking, gun violence thing. Like, we're all over the board, because all these things need to be touched on. We don't just want to talk about the border or just want to talk about gun violence. And it's fun to kind of like lily pad jump, because you learn a lot that way and you meet a lot of really fucking cool people. But that will like add so many years of sort of like sustenance and fuel to like whatever it is you're planning on doing, whether it's creating a band or your own little activist group. If you just figure out a way to do it with people that you care about, and don't do it for the money, and have fun. Just figure out a way so that when you drive away from whatever it is, you're like laughing and you're going somewhere to like tell some stories, you're not just like bugging out the whole time, because it sucks to like, I mean, it's not fun like hiding in bushes when the police are looking for you, like that's not a great time, but
not terrible either,
Not a
though.
terrible time. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of fun and exciting. Gets the heart rate up.
yeah, it's like you don't want to go into it like looking for that, but I mean,
Be smart. Be smart.
yeah, exactly. Don't
Corporate
overf-
vandalism
Pace yourself.
kills depression.
Yeah,
There we go.
yeah, exactly. There's your free healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to shoot anybody. Just go invest in some cat masks and some spray paint. Yeah.
And if you get caught,
shit.
it solves your rent problem and your food budget.
You guys figured it all out.
Yeah, you're kind of good.
Yeah, exactly.
Bologna sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learn a lot of spreads, different ways to, make soup taste good.
Spread's not bad. Spread's kind of fucking good.
Yeah,
On a winter's day, Man, I'm stuffed.
Becky said it's really gross when we eat on the podcast. All right, so there it is. Part 2, episode 49 with InDecline. Snacks from Peace Pies.
Thank you.
You, the listener, viewer, comrade, whatever you want to call it. We appreciate you. We want to say what's up to Ruinous Media, to Becky, to Andy, to all the homies, all the past guests and the future guests, which we don't know who you are yet. Fuck, what a weird world we're in.
And it's going to get weirder.
It's going to get weirder.
Brace yourselves.
Yeah. Check out InDecline, and I don't know. I mean, just hopefully you'll find inspiration from it, and we need to do something for the sake of humanity. It's just such a crazy world, and people's ability to negotiate peace is dwindling. It's a bummer. So yeah, I don't know. Check out InDecline, and we appreciate the support for this podcast, and we hope to see you on the next one.
Yep. Episode 50.
Episode 50. Yep, we made it. All right. Thank you very much.
Becky, this bite's for you.
Cult and Culture is a Ruinous Media podcast proudly sponsored by Earthquaker Devices, Heartwork Coffee, Diodario, Kindred, Smashed Plastic Record Pressing, and San Diego Food Shed.
Planet B.